please welcome Carla Odell.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. It's wonderful to be here. Would you guys make a deal with me this morning that I promise I will end on time out of respect to our next speaker, but also will you promise that you'll talk to me throughout this? I mean, you've been up 2 or 3 hours, right? It's not asking too much. So I promise to stay on time if you'll promise to talk to me. So as Jane said, APQC has been doing knowledge management for what? I don't know, Darcy, Jim, 20 to 25 years now. And some of the problems and issues are always the same, which means there is job security. No, Stan, we will not work ourselves out of a job. People are always going to be looking for information and knowledge. What a wonderful theme for a conference, right? Search. I mean, we are always searching. I'll talk some more about that in a minute. Communities. People want to belong somewhere. Remember in the old days before we worked virtually? Does anybody old enough to remember before we all worked virtually? It used to be, the old joke about IBM. They used to move people from location to location, and they said IBM stood for I've been moved. Right. Well, what it stands for now is I'm by myself. People are working virtually. So they want to be connected to each other. In fact, communities are one of the few ways that you can create culture in a virtual environment, in a virtual enterprise. The people are always looking for lessons learned, and not just to capture them, but what is the real prize in lessons learned? This is your cue now. What is the real prize in lessons learned? Reuse. Thank you. Yeah. So it's the key there. That has not changed for people. The desire to find an expert and get a question answered quickly, that hasn't changed either. But some things seem to have changed. Something is shifting. And I'm going to let you hear some of those voices, and you tell me what you pick up that might have changed.
Our lead scientist is retiring next year. We better get people up to speed faster.
We can't afford to waste time looking for stuff we know we have.
We can't afford to make the same mistakes. Don't give me a bunch of extra information. I just need the answer.
If we don't get on top of this new technology quickly, we're going to be left behind.
Haven't we done this before? If only we knew what we know.
All right, what do you hear? What might have changed? The velocity of it. Yes. Do the rest of you feel this sense that speed is somehow more urgent for us? And it's not just speed of execution, it's also speed of learning. If you look at one of the problems that's facing a lot of scientific, technical, and engineering organizations, it's this shortage of experts. And we've got novices, we've got what we call nexperts in the pipeline. Novices are people just coming in. Nexperts are that untapped resource of people who got about 5 to 10 years experience at something. And then you've got your experts who are at the end of that pipeline because they're on their way out the door, many of them, right? How many of you are experiencing that, a fear that you're going to be losing people with expertise? A lot of us are doing that. So there's 3 different speed challenges there. On the one hand, we got to get the novices up to speed more quickly. And heaven knows, a lot of work's being done to do that. I mean, huge training dollars to do that when people come into the organization. But the untapped resource is growing those experts. What can we do to help people who are almost at that level of expertise to accelerate the rate at which they learn? And that's a key issue. The other need for speed is even if you got a bunch of experts around the world, especially in technical areas, the nature of the knowledge, the complexity of the projects, everything is changing so rapidly that the new knowledge is constantly being created and needs to be created. So there's a whole urgency, and I believe that KM has a role to play in that. The urgency is not just for speed. The urgency is for learning. How fast can we learn? So this is your turn again. I'm going to ask you to turn to the people at your table and just take 2 or 3 minutes. What is driving the need for rapid learning and speed in your organization? That was your cue again. All right. Just when it's starting to get fun, right, she has to break us up. Somebody yell it out. What did you hear? What's driving the need for speed, faster learning in your organization? I'll repeat it. So just shout it out. Organizational change. Say some more about that. You mean people are just moving around? Yeah, mergers, people coming and going. Unfortunately, sometimes more going than coming. The changes in organizational structure. Then who knows, something gets lost everywhere, and what you know may not even matter anymore, right? What else? What else is driving? What is that? Competition? Market competition. Yeah. So constant change in the market. Is that what you were going to say as well?
The technology, the new technology.
Yeah. The new technology that's coming in and requires your people to understand it is changing it at a faster rate all the time. We know that, yeah. Let's take a couple more. Yes, sir, you were having fun at that table.
Early career hires who have an expectation of easy access to knowledge.
Oh, that's great. If you didn't hear that, early career hires, people just coming into the organization who have an expectation of easy access to the information. I was talking to a guy who works for NASA the other day, and he said he had just entered NASA a couple of years before, so that entry was still fresh in his mind. And he said, I spent the first 2 weeks learning stuff they could have sent me in advance. Right? I don't need to be on site to do that. Just send me the stuff. I'll do that, and then we can do something more meaningful when we're together. So they're expecting more information sooner, when they want it, just in time, just enough, just for me, and then let me go talk to some people. One more. Let's take one more back here. We got one back here? Yes. Have to speak louder. Rapid environmental degradation. If we can't find another planet to go to, we're going to have to do a better job, at fixing the one we've got. Yeah, a little maintenance and repair wouldn't hurt a bit. And the rate at which, am I picking up on what you're after? Good for you. Well, thank you for giving us a global moment. Every once in a while, we need to remember why we're all here and what we're trying to do. So you agree with me, like this speed thing is really important. So I am going to do very quickly, because we're all into speed, a review of what we seem to be learning about how can we accelerate the rate of learning in organizations. So premise number one, people and organizations both learn, but they learn differently. There's a huge body of research out there now, which I invite all of you to try to tap into, which is what is the new findings about how we learn. And there's a great book, if you want one that's easy, accessible. It's by Benedict Carey, and it's called How We Learn. You cannot possibly forget that, How We Learn. And there are a number of myths about learning. So let's talk about how people learn for just a second. We can be said to have learned something when we can recall it at an appropriate time and put it to use. That is what is meant by having learned something. So what enhances learning? Well, it turns out that focused attention and reading does not enhance learning. Spaced practice and the attempt to recall enhances learning. So instead of saying, I got to learn this thing, let me read it over and over again, here's what you need to do. This tip changed my life when I read it. You need to read it, and then you need to walk away and say, what do I know? And you'll realize immediately the things you've forgotten. You won't know what they are. You'll go back to what you originally saw, and they will suddenly fill in the blank for you. Because the second premise is people learn better when they're trying to solve a problem, when there's something missing. Why do you think we Google? We do it at that moment that there's something missing in our information and knowledge exchange. So I'll come to that in a minute. At that teachable moment is when we'll start to look. People forget within 1 hour of this talk, maybe sooner, you will have forgotten at least half of the main points. The other thing, at least half. The other thing about the way people learn and the way we forget, forgetting is the brain's spam filter. It's just like, let's get rid of all that stuff. If I'm not going to use it again quickly and repeatedly, I don't need to keep it. What fires together wires together up here, guys. So if you want to retain it, it's got to be used over and over again. So that forgetting is a really good thing because there's not nearly enough room in that 3 pounds to hold all that stuff that's coming in and out. So the other thing to remember is that people will remember the first thing you tell them and the last thing you tell them. It's called the primacy and the recency effect. When somebody joins an organization, you're talking about that newcomer, they are at their most teachable moment. What happens to them in the first 2 or 3 months is going to determine how they feel about the organization. And people remember later how what they felt when they were with you far more than they remember what you say. That's what we remember. That's the other principle of our memory. The rich tapestry of context and experience and vision over text is powerful. So remember all those things when we're trying to create things that people want to remember, that we want them to remember in our organizations. But organizations learn differently than people. They both learn. Knowledge management is how organizations learn and remember. But without some systematic process to make that learning and retention and recall happen, it's not going to happen in organizations, regardless of what happens to the individual. Just because I know it doesn't mean that we know it. Just because I had the experience doesn't mean that we had the experience. And one of the things that knowledge management can do is help overcome corporate amnesia. That's really one of our jobs. There's some other things that we can do that other organizational units who are focused on learning can't do. So what are some other ways that organizations can retain and learn? It's not just knowledge management. There's a couple other ways, but we're a little different. You know them. Training, yeah. Training is the codified knowledge and routines and so on. What's another way? We capture what we know and we retain it. Work experience, that's the way an individual would do it, that's right. How would an organization do it? Formal business processes, thank you. Even software is just routinized knowledge. It's just the routines. There's another way, too. Has anybody ever noticed that most business rules are a result of a problem or accident or mistake that got made? And that's the way the organization tries to retain that lessons learned, is it creates a rule about it. At least 50% of the business rules out there are a result of somebody screwing up and them trying to prevent it again. But there's something that knowledge management can do that training and business rules and process documentation can't do. We can do 2 things. We can help the organization remember, we can help the group remember, and we can help the individual remember and learn. And let's start with the individual. The training, business rules, and processes are not charged with the responsibility to alert the individual when something has changed. And that alerting function is something that knowledge management can do. We can do it through communities, we can do it through lessons learned methods, we can do it through after-action reviews, but that's not something that the training organization doesn't have the agility, nor should it, for that moment-to-moment transitory kind of thing. That's why we have communities. So there's other things that we can do to help them people remember. One is what I mentioned about the new hire. People really would like to get this is why search is so important. Just in time, just enough, just for me, at the teachable moment when I need it. Because that's what KM can do, is to be there at the teachable moment. And that's that moment when I have a gap in something I know, and I'm most motivated to learn and fill that gap. And that's a role that we can play. That's where informal learning comes in. It's like the formal stuff that the organization does is powerful and important, and you don't want people out there, drilling holes in the ground or doing brain surgery without formal training. They absolutely need the formal training. But at the moment they need to know, what do you do when this catheter fell out of this kind of patient at this time and you can't afford to have Watson? What do you do, right? Well, that's when KM and the community and the experts shine. That's when we need to be there. And it's an important, this is not a mundane task Stan was talking about where, why do people ask, you could work yourself out of a job in KM? Well, finance is never asked if they can work themselves out of a job. In many ways, we're more important than finance. We're what keep people alive when there's a mistake, when there's something learned in the field that people need to know to prevent a serious error. We need to be the ones there to help. And that's why one of the reasons knowledge management is so important. Let's also talk about the other reason that we need to be there for the individual. And I call it avoid dead ends, empty shelves, and desert islands. When people are looking for an answer, especially if they've just joined a community, if they don't get an answer, Stan, what happens if they don't get an answer? They don't come back. All you need is one time they didn't get it. Now, if they get an answer the first, second, or third time, you can miss after that 3 or 4 times before they'll give up. That's called extinction. It doesn't happen for a while. They'll keep pressing that button until they think they're going to get rewarded again. But the first 2 or 3 times, do not let people have a dead end. Have a human being somewhere watching that if there is no answer, get them an answer, even if you have to go offline to do it. Empty shelves. Your brain is like a retail store, back to that memory theme again. There's this huge warehouse in back of all of this information. But on the shelves in front, there's only room for 2 or 3, 4, maybe up to 7 items at any one time. People can only work with, in working memory, a few pieces of information. So that warehouse is incredibly important, but make sure there's something on the shelves that makes people want to come back. And finally, desert islands. This is expertise location. Again, people don't want to be alone. If they're in a survival mode on a desert island, they need to find somebody. And that's when we really shine. That's when we can really make a difference. So here's an example of being there at the teachable moment and dealing with the fact that there's such a dramatic shortage of experts now. It's MWH Global. They're an engineering and construction firm, and they had growth. Love it, growing, wonderful, but it was outstripping the supply of experts and people who understood the machinery out in the field. And they do this daily inspection, and they have these checklists, but the machinery's changing. Like you said, the technology, the field situations are harsh and different, and they need to be able to have people on site who can visually inspect that equipment and make sure that it's right, and they don't have enough of them. So the answer was, and this was also to not leave people on a desert island, is to take people who are experts or maybe even novices and have them inspect using a checklist, but then send pictures in to the experts who are in a central location so that overnight the experts could look at it and answer any questions and tell them what they needed to look for. That's that visual thing again. It's being there at the teachable moment, and it's leveraging the experts that you have. So the tablet, the expert on a tablet, it changed overnight, every night that would change. And it was vetted by the experts so that they knew that, again, you don't want that machinery blowing up on you. It's very important. So let's talk about the group. What does it mean to say that a group has learned something? What do you guys think? What does it mean to say a group has learned something? A common understanding, a common language, we're on the same page, wonderful. What else? Raised skill level across the board. The whole average skill level has gone up. Now you kids don't fight. Okay.
They might come up with something new.
They might come up with something new. If I am in a group and I have a relatively high trust level within that group, I can be certain that even if I don't know it, if somebody else in my group does, I might as well. I almost know it. That the power of a group is the power of the collective. We know more than I know. We all know that phrase. It's a powerful thing in a world where the knowledge is changing so rapidly that we can't, no one of us, I don't care how smart you are, can keep up with it. I mean, I do knowledge management, and I can't keep up with everything that's happening out there in terms of the technology. We'll talk a little bit about that. Here's the other thing, and Stan, you will love this. Communities are still KM's killer app. You know? Yay! Stan's thrilled about that. It's true. It's true. Now we get to think about them differently, and I'm probably a little more accepting a variation on the theme of what's a community, but it's community. It's a feeling of belonging to a group that I chose to be with because there's a reason that I need to be there and I need to come back. And my allegiance to that group makes me willing to help other people in it as well. It is powerful. We are tribal creatures. We don't thrive alone. Very few of us do. The most productive and creative groups in organizations anywhere are those that do two things. And there's research at MIT, out of the MIT Media Lab, that absolutely substantiates this. They do two things. The members of the group seek ideas outside the group all the time. They're always bringing new ideas in. And then within the group, they vet those ideas. They don't all say, oh, that's such a good idea. They're all just wonderful. They actually have the trust with each other to say, this is good. How can we build on this? This won't work for us. And they winnow that out, and they come up with great new ideas. And that's what creates productive and innovative groups. So communities are still one way that can happen, but did you notice part of that was the ability to bring ideas in from outside? So I may be a member of a community and also a work group. If I'm a member of the community, I can bring those communities' ideas back to my work group. And that makes a huge difference in the innovativeness and productivity, potentially, of my work group. So this is a classic example of successful communities. How many of you know Schlumberger? They're EUREKA communities. They go back to 1998, which was the year that Jack and I wrote the first book on knowledge management. They've got 50 self-governing groups with individuals of common interests, and they got 31,000 people in members across it, 150 of those community, 2,500 leaders. They run 350 webinars a year, 7 million career networking profiles. A CNP that's how they find each other, is with these career networking profiles, so that helps with expertise location. And this is fun, the person who runs knowledge management for Schlumberger also runs talent management. You cannot get promoted without being actively engaged in some kind of community, either as a leader or an expert. It has a dramatic accelerating effect on that communities and how they function. So let's look at it from the enterprise level. That if organizations, and KM is how organizations learn and remember, let's see what some of this means to us. I'm going to show you some data. This is another pop quiz for you guys. Can you read these? We did a survey of over 700 of APQC members. We have 500 member organizations from around the world. Most of you may, in fact, be members. And we asked scientific and technical people, KM experts, IT experts, HR leaders, and process improvement people what they thought were the most effective learning methods in their organizations. And by the way, there was no difference between all those groups in what they felt. Same day, it could have been a homogeneous group. Same result. There was over 700 of them. What do you notice about the ranking in this list? Information's at the bottom. Yep. What's at the top? People. What else do you notice? It's variations on that theme. The higher the interaction, the more intimate and higher the interaction, the more effective it is. Yeah. What we've discovered, what's tragic about this is look at what's at the bottom. Expert transfer, libraries, so on, things that should work well, content, anything related to content management. It is not okay that our content management systems don't work sometimes, or that they don't find people with, it's not okay, because that's our warehouse in the back of our brain, collectively. And these things have to work for us. We have to be able to find it. But here's the part that we often forget, and I think you guys know it, which is this, that it's the people approaches that make the system approaches work. The technology matters, but what matters more is the change management process we use to introduce it, and the way in which we build allegiance. For example, you can create fabulous community software and buy it and adopt it, but if you don't already have a community that wants it and is already existing, you've just built it and nobody came. And we all have had that experience, unfortunately, with one thing or another. We fall in love with our own stuff, and that we forget that other people do things for their reasons, not for our reasons. I'm going to ask you a question. Why are people approaches perceived as more effective than system approaches? Turn to your table. We'll take just a couple of minutes. Why are they perceived as more effective? So talk at your tables for just a minute. All right, let's hear from some people we haven't heard from before. So there's a county over here we haven't heard from before. Let's hear from this county over here. Why are people approaches, Sarah? We trust people. Yeah, we trust people. As opposed to...
We trust that a person can understand our context and drill down faster than a computer.
Okay, we trust that a person can understand our context and get to what we're after faster because there's more dialogue. Yeah, monologues don't tend to get us the right answer. Yeah, dialogues, yes.
You mentioned that people learn from the problem solving. So while we have a dialogue, explain our problem and then solving together, that actually is much faster learning than just reading and just one way of information transfer.
Great point. You picked up that we learn better when we're trying to solve a problem, and the dialogue and the answer in real time makes a difference. It turns out that one of the other ways that you can accelerate the rate of learning dramatically in individuals is to give them instant feedback constantly. To give them as many trials as you can and instant feedback constantly. Have you ever heard the story of the chicken sexers in Japan? It turns out that when little chicks are just born, it's very difficult to tell if it's male or female, and it does matter for egg laying, right? So you want to be able to sort them. They've never found a way to be able to do that in any sort of technical way. So they have people who are expert chicken sexers, and they sit there and they go male, female, 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 male, female, female, and they can't explain how they do it. But the way they train the next generation of chicken sexers is female. Nope, wrong. The expert stands behind them and gives them immediate feedback on this, yes, no question. At least in the case of chickens, it's a yes, no question. So that's the immediate feedback is powerful. Never mind. Yes.
So actually, we come to know, in a group discussion, we come to know what we know.
Oh, that's beautiful. In a group discussion, we come to know what we know. It's only by talking to other people and saying it out loud. That's beautiful. That was beautiful. Yeah, that's how we come. It's in relationship. and in dialogue that we come to know what we know. Yeah. So what does that tell us about what we need to do when we design knowledge management approaches? We need to have a high-touch component. High-tech is fabulous, but there's got to be a high-touch component. Without it, your high-tech may be a waste of investment. And even there's all kinds of clever ways. And we have literally at APQC hundreds of case studies on how to create high-touch in even a virtual environment. And just www.apqc.org. May I repeat, www.apqc.org, and we have spent 20 years collecting best practices. You don't need to invent these. You can just leapfrog with them. So there's a lot of great cases on high touch. I'm going to shift gears because I just said we've been doing 20 years of knowledge management, and we have, in fact, learned a lot. We developed a maturity model a while ago for knowledge management, and we've been working with it for about 10 years. And we've had over 200 companies get very deep validation on their knowledge management maturity, their capabilities, et cetera. And we give them on a scale of 1 to 5. One of the things we found is that if we want to promote learning in organizations, if KM wants a seat at the table of rapid and effective learning and change, we have to make the business case for it. And I am about to give you data based on those 20 years that helps make that business case. So that data that we collected and that we validated, our people will spend hours with a company that submits their information to get a maturity index. And we'll spend hours to make sure that we have it right. We have it from over about 200. Here's the 5 levels. You can find, again, all of this on www.apqc.org. We want you to learn. We want you to go there. So there's levels 1 through 5. And as you move up the levels of maturity, the knowledge that your organization has becomes more and more competitive, more and more agile, you have more and more ability for it to be shared widely and used again and again and again to create something new. So obviously level 5 is a fabulous place to be. Level 4 ain't bad, but a lot of people can do really well at level 3. Try to standardize that knowledge, apply it broadly across the globe. So those are the 5 levels. I won't go into all the capabilities that go into them. Here's the business case for KM so that you can make the business case in your organization. There's a correlation between knowledge management maturity and organizational outcomes in terms of finances. So this is premise number 1. There is 2 times better performance, financial performance, with higher levels of maturity. And if you look on our website and look at the case studies, you can find that. The higher the levels of maturity, the higher the outcomes in the organization, both in terms of return on sales and return on assets. But wait, there's more. We've identified, and we meaning the royal we, with the extraordinary team of APQC people, one of whom led the research in the back. Lauren, raise your hand so they will jump all over you later. Yes, Lauren led this research. We identified out of all of this data from all these companies, 15 capabilities that we call the accelerators of KM maturity. How fortunate is that, given that I'm doing a talk on speed? The accelerators of KM maturity, of all the things that you could do, these things make the most difference. And one of them is the formal business case. If you can make a formal business case for KM, you can tell the organization what problem you'll solve and what the payoff for that would be. It does not necessarily have to be financial. Some things are not financial, but the payoff is very clear, like training experts and having them available at every job site, being able to grow the organization because you have enough of that knowledge. There are those things that matter, that you're 3 times more likely to secure the budget for the effort, for the KM effort. That's not 10% more likely, guys. That's not 30% more likely. That's 3 times more likely. Not only that, you're 3 times more likely, you're also 5 times more likely to be able to expand your budget to take care of demand. So if you fulfill the promise of the initial business case, then the ability to expand it goes up. And this is based on over 200 companies and who have been put through the ringer by us to really understand their levels of maturity. So why should you then conduct financial analysis and documentation? And believe me, it's a pain in the neck to do, and it's hard, But if you do it really well just 1 or 2 times, they're not going to ask you again for 5 years. You can get away without it for about 5 years before a new generation of management comes in and say, why are we spending all this money on knowledge management? And then you got to do it again. But there are other reasons for doing it. It expands the budget. You get a lot of senior leadership and business unit support. You get traction to expand, and you're making evidence of ongoing business value, which makes everybody feel good. When you're winning, you're grinning. You need your KM team feeling good. You need your business unit leaders feeling good. When you're winning, you're grinning. Oh, oops. How many of you know this symbol? By now you should. Third day here. We got any IBMers in the crowd? And tell me who this is. Louder. Watson. I had a crush on Watson. In 2010 was the defining moment for me for Watson. What happened in 2010? I cannot end a talk on learning, individual, group, and organization without talking about machine learning and cognitive computing. This is on the horizon for us guys in KM. It's not there yet for us. There's no poor man's version of it yet, but it's on the horizon. For me, the tipping point was when Watson beat Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter is his name, in 2010. And I went, OMG. It costs millions of dollars. I can't afford it, but we're getting on the time when it's going to be possible. So what do you think it's going to look like for us in the near future? What is cognitive computing and machine learning going to look like for us in the near future? I can tell you what I think it is. You tell me. What do you think it's going to look like for us in KM? Lots of expensive failures to start. Absolutely. We are on that Gartner hype curve, and we are moving up it fast. Yeah, that's for sure going to happen. What else?
We're going to train a machine.
We're going to train a machine. Yeah. As Ken Jennings, the guy on the left, said, I bow to our new computer overlords. We'll be provisioning the right knowledge at the right time automatically. What we'll be doing is giving people better and better search results sooner, more customized and more personal for them. You already have an example of cognitive computing and machine learning, and you're carrying it with you right now. What is it? I have one if I didn't leave it in my room. I'm not going to get any dumber than I already am. We're pretty much tapped that out, the dumbness question. Personalized digital assistants. You know, remember 4 or 5 years ago, it was only 4 or 5 years ago, people were bringing their phones to work, and we thought the world, no, I didn't worry about it, but the IT department thought the world was coming to an end with everybody bringing their own. What's going to happen when we all bring our own version of the personalized digital assistant who can read, he or she can understand my voice? Siri doesn't get me, so I'll say that right now. But there will be some that do. Viv may be one coming up. They're going to get you. They're going to understand. They're going to learn you, and they're going to start responding and providing you information, and you're going to want to bring him or her with you to work. In fact, you will. She's already in here, right? And they're going to narrative. A lot of what gets written now, you know how you hate people hate writing up lessons learned and project reports? With narrative sciences, they're not going to have to do that much of that anymore. The automated reports are going to be, what do you think the ESPN sports reports are? Machine is writing those. It's not a human being telling you, so-and-so had a great first inning and blah, blah, blah. That's a machine telling you that, not a person. And that's being driven by a company called Narrative Sciences. And more of that's going to be used. That's going to be useful to us. The personal digital assistants are going to be useful to us. So what I do know is that if knowledge management doesn't get out in front of this, it could end badly for us. Not since the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey Has it ended badly for the computer? Did anybody see Her? Great movie. Did anybody see this one, Ex Machina? Great movie. Spoiler alert, it ended badly for the humans. They didn't win this one. This could end beautifully for us as humans and as knowledge management leaders if we'll stay in touch with it. I'm not saying go out and be this is one where the bleeding edge is the leading edge. It's going to be too expensive for many of us to do anything, but watch it really closely. Our KM Advanced Working Group at APQC, we have one a year, is working on it now. I'm just saying, you heard it here. You want to know more about the accelerators of knowledge management maturity and how do you make the case for KM? You can go here. And then you can also always go to www.apqc.org. Thank you guys so much. It gives me great pleasure to be with you.